Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about a photo composition called isolation. So isolating the main subject, the main focal point, the hero of the image, whatever it is. So you've identified your photographic intention, what you want to photograph, why you're photographing it. Part of that process is working out what the main subject is. Isolation is one of those great compositional techniques to position that main subject within the frame. So we're going to talk about different ways that we can isolate against the background and really make that pop and stand out to the viewer. We'll get into it after the intro. So the big question is this: how do smartphone photo enthusiasts like us become that creative and confident photographer we desire and deserve to be, creating those beautiful, impactful photos? This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Mike, and welcome to the Smartphone Photography Club. As you know, if you're listening to the podcast, I have a video version of this where I'm talking to you in camera on YouTube and on the website as well, smartphonephotographytraining.com/tutorials. Hit the microscope, little icon, the search icon, and just type in isolate, and you'll be able to find this article in there amongst that growing library of free tutorials, which is fantastic. Alrighty, that said, I'm going to refer to the article on the website as I'm reading this too. So clearly communicate the subject or story. That's what isolation is. That's what you really want with your photographic intention. So I've got here, we live in an era of being overexposed to visual content. Isn't that true? I mean, everywhere you go, you're bombarded with ads. But not only that, even when you're on your phone, you are bombarded with so many visuals. And a marketing term is pattern interrupt. So unless we just scroll, unless there's something that kind of stands out, then that will interrupt us from our scrolling motion and go, oh, wow, oh, that's a cool photo. And that's really cool. And one of the ways we do that is through strong composition and making that main subject stand out. And that's what this one is about. So first step is identifying the subject. And I've got a 10-step process here that I'm going to go through with you. So identifying the subject. And you'll notice those professional landscape photographs or even street photography, maybe not so much street photography, but other genres, they're clean, they're distraction free, and you instantly you interpret it and go, oh yeah, that's what it's about. And so that's identifying the main subject is one of the main, it really is the number one step. Okay. Number 2, remove the background clutter before you take the photo. So if you're out for dinner and you're taking photos of somebody there at the table, and I've got an example here where it's my daughter sitting there, and I've got so much clutter on the table, and it's just a mess. But when you take all that clutter and you simplify the process or simplify the photo, remove the sauce bottle, remove the water pitcher, whatever it is on the table, just remove some of that, especially the things with height. Removing those before you take the photo can really help to isolate. Removing the background after the photo is the next step. Now, you guys have heard me talk about healing within Snapseed, but also one of my favorite apps, recommended apps, is Retouch by Adversoft. They have a healing option, but also a cloning option, which, yes, the healing is really good. You can go and swipe your finger over an object and then it will magically disappear. And it does that by replacing where you swipe with surrounding pixels of information and then filling it in magically. Sometimes that doesn't work so good. With cloning, what that does is you can tap your finger on the screen and say, okay, from this point, when I swipe underneath there, I want you to copy and paste what's above it into this area that I'm swiping. So that's a great way of removing that background clutter after you've taken the photo to really help make the main subject kind of pop and stand out. Blurring the background is also another great way. Having that background blur, creating that just out of focus, just it moves you. So what am I trying to say here? Gosh, getting tongue-tied. So removing the background, sometimes you can't, can you? I mean, I'm trying to be practical here. We don't always have the opportunity to remove things and change the angle, because sometimes changing the angle can change the lighting. It can change the content of the scene. But there might be distracting elements like a fire extinguisher on the wall or something like that. But if you can really dramatically blur that out, that is fantastic. Now on our smartphones, we have lots of computational photography, and some of them have options like portrait mode or live focus mode, and they're great for creating the blurred background. If you're taking photos of, say, flowers and you're within that 7 centimeters, then the Strumon Optics cinematic macro lens is brilliant because it optically blurs the whole background, get that beautiful creamy background. Again, that suits that practical situation where you're photographing within 7 centimeters. If you can't do that, there's another app called Afterfocus. It's a fantastic app. It's like $2.99, less than the price of a cup of coffee. You can go and you can select the foreground, what you want in focus. You can select the background, and then the middle ground where you kind of it's half the intensity of focus that you ultimately choose for the background. And it's great. You can have a strong out of focus background, and you can control it so that it's a bit like the smartphones that do have that computational control to background blur. You can adjust the intensity of the blur. Okay, shoot from a lower angle to isolate the subject against the sky. That can be really good. Instead of having background clutter behind the person, like trees or whatever, getting down lower, you can have them isolated behind the sky. So the sky is just one constant color or tone, whatever it is, whatever's going on, whether it's overcast or a blue sky. Shooting from a lower angle and isolating them from the background against the sky is just a fantastic way, even if it's just to practice this theory. Using lighting to place a spotlight on the subject is another great way. In early morning or late afternoon when the sun's down nice and low, you can get rays of light coming through, and that can create a bit of a spotlight. Or you can create it by yourself with a torch of another smartphone. You can actually get in there and create some beautiful lighting to really isolate that main subject, because it's exposed brighter. Now, a lot of these things we can do prior to capture, identify opportunities, or we can do it in post-processing when we're using our editing apps. Like this one here, number 7, darken the background. So, as you know, things that attract our attention are sharp, they're vivid colors, movement. Not so much in photography, can be movement, but it can attract our attention, especially a photo that infers that there's movement going on, like a Dutch angle, and I covered that in a previous episode. On the flip side, instead of something bright that attracts our attention, darkening the background can actually make the subject stand out and isolate them. So there's plenty of options to do that. For that selective editing, so there's snaps there where you can use the brush tool, or the selective tool is my favorite. Getting close to the subject. So I talked about this again in a previous episode. I talked about distortion. I talked about the distance to the subject for that perspective distortion. So getting close to the subject can isolate them from the background. It not only fills the frame, but everything else behind them looks smaller by doing that. So that's a great way. Number 9, selective color can really make the subject pop out, isolate from the background. And then I tell you what, the most powerful selective color ones are not necessarily black and white with a color, but one where the colors are muted in the background, and then the colors of the main subject, and then there might be some other elements in the background that have the similar color, where again you can make those pop and encourage the viewer's eye to move around. So selective color can look fantastic. Number 10, simple single color or texture in the background. You've seen those amazing shots. I'm thinking, who does it the best? Fashion, so street fashion. You'll see a lot of them will get out and they'll have a model, somebody, but wearing the gear, and they'll be in front of a doorway. They'll be in front of a door or a laneway where it's just a constant texture, color behind them, and then that makes them stand out. Now, whether that's so many different ways you can make it stand out with contrasting colors from the background, you can make them pop and stand out, or it could be muted. But the thing is, simplify the background will make that person stand out a little bit more. So we've covered some smartphone specific techniques there. most importantly, there's lots of, oh my gosh, there's so many different apps that you can use to isolate the subject, and it's so much fun. In my 6-week photography transformation, the live program that I have in weeks 5 and 6, that's where I get into the editing, and that's one of the things we really work on is the isolation and contrast, and how to increase contrast and decrease contrast. And if these terms are a bit overwhelming for you, we start slow and steady, and it's a small group, so I pitch it exactly at the level that you need. And yeah, it's one of those, isolating the subject is not just a compositional technique. It's a way of attracting, controlling, and guiding the attention of the viewer. It's as you can tell, I find it very exciting. It's good stuff. So that's it. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.